Ted Martin and Sam Miller were good friends. They spent a lot of time together. On this particular night, they were sitting on a fence near the post office, talking about one thing and another. There was a field of turnips across the road. Suddenly, they saw something crawl out of the field and stand up. It looked like a man, but in the dark it was hard to tell for sure. Then it was gone, but soon it appeared again. It walked halfway across the road, then turned around and went back into the field. Then it came out a third time and started towards them. By now, Ted and Sam were scared, and they started running. But when they finally stopped, they decided they were being foolish. They weren't sure what had scared them, so they decided to go back and get a better look. Pretty soon they saw it. It was coming to meet them. It was wearing black pants, white shirts, and black suspenders. Sam said, "I'm gonna touch it. Then we'll know if it's real." He walked up and peered into its face. It had bright, penetrating eyes sunk deep in its head. It looked like a skeleton. Ted took one look and screamed. And again he and Sam ran, but this time the skeleton followed them. When they got to Ted's house, they stood in front of the doorway and watched. It stayed out on the road for a while, then it disappeared. A year later, Ted got sick and died. Towards the end, Sam sat up with him every night. The night Ted died, Sam said he looked just like a skeleton. The timber wolves around the French Creek had gotten out of hand. There were so many wolves, the farmers could not stop them from killing their cattle and sheep. So the state put up a bounty on them. It would pay a hunter $10 for every wolf pelt he turned in. A butcher in town named Bill Williams thought that was pretty good money. He stopped working as a butcher and started killing wolves. He was good at it. Every year he killed over 500 of them. It came out to $5,000. It was quite a bit of money in those days. After 4 or 5 years, Bill had killed so many wolves, there were hardly any left in the area. So he retired, and he vowed never to harm another wolf because the wolves had made him rich. Then one day, a farmer reported that a white wolf killed 2 of his sheep. He had shot at it and hit it, but bullets didn't have any effect. But that wolf was seen all over the countryside, killing and running, but nobody could stop it. One night, it came into Bill's yard and killed his pet cow. Bill forgot about his decision never to harm another wolf. He went to the town the next morning and bought a young lamb for bait. He took it out to the hills and tied it to a tree. Then he backed off about 50 yards and sat under another tree. With his gun in his lap, he waited. When Bill didn't come back, his friends started looking for him. Finally, they found the lamb. It was still tied to the tree. It was hungry, but it was alive. Then they found Bill. He was still sitting against the other tree, but he was dead. His throat had been torn open. There was no sign of a struggle. His gun hadn't been fired. There were no tracks in the soil around him. As for the white wolf, it was never seen again. One time, a preacher went to see if he could put a haunt to rest at a house in his settlement. The house had been haunted for about 10 years. Several people had tried to stay there all night, but they always would get scared out by the haunt. So this preacher took his Bible and went to the house. Went on in, built himself a good fire, and lit a lamp. Sat there reading the Bible. Then just before midnight, he heard something start up the cellar, walking back and forth. Then it sounded like somebody was trying to scream and got choked off. There was a lot of thrashing and struggling, and finally everything got quiet. The old preacher took up his Bible again, but before he could start reading, he heard footsteps coming up the cellar stairs. He sat watching the door to the cellar, and the footsteps kept coming closer and closer. He saw the doorknob turn, and when the door began to open, he jumped up and hollered, "What do you want?" The door shut back easy-like, and there wasn't a sound. The preacher was trembling a little, but he finally opened up the Bible and read a while. Then he got up, laid the book on the chair, and went to mending the fire. The haunt started walking again, and step, 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 up the cellar stairs. The old preacher sat watching the door, saw the doorknob turn, and the door open. It looked like a young woman. He backed up and said, "Who are you? What do you want?" The haunt sort of swayed there like she didn't know what to do. Then she just faded out. The old preacher waited and waited, and when he didn't hear any more noises, he went over and shut the door. He was sweating and trembling all over, but he was a brave man, and he thought he'd be able to see it through. So he turned his chair to where he could watch, and he sat down and waited. It wasn't long before he heard the haunt starting up again, slowly, step, 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 closer and closer, step, step. It was right at the door. The preacher stood up and held out his Bible in front of him. Then the knob slowly turned and the door opened wide. This time, the preacher spoke quiet-like. He said, "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, who are you and what do you want?" The haunt came right across the room, straight to him, and took hold of his coat. The young woman was about 20 years old. Her hair was turned and tangled, and the flesh was dropping off her face, so he could see the bones and part of her teeth. She had no eyeballs, but there was sort of a blue light way back in her eye socket, and she had no nose on her face. Then she started talking. It sounded like her face was coming and going with the wind blowing it. She told how her lover had killed her for money and buried her in the cellar. She said if the preacher would dig up her bones and bury her properly, she could rest. Then she told him to take the end joint of the little finger from her left hand and lay it in the collection plate at the next church meeting, and he'd find out who had murdered her. And she said, "If you come back here once more after that, you'll hear my voice at midnight. And I'll tell you where my money is hid, and you can give it to the church." The haunt sobbed like she was tied, and she sunk down towards the floor and was gone. The preacher found her bones and buried them in the graveyard. Next Sunday, the preacher put the finger bone in the collection plate, and when a certain man had touched it, it stuck to his hand. The man jumped up and rubbed and scraped and tore at the bone, trying to get it off. Then he went to screaming like he was going crazy. Well, he confessed to the murder and they took him on to jail. After the man was hung, the preacher went back down to the house one midnight, and the haunt's voice told him to dig under the hearth rock. He did. They found a big sack of money, and where the haunt had held onto his coat, the print of the tiny bony fingers burned right into the cloth. It never did come out.